Hello, and thank you for joining us for Long Beach Symphony's Musically Speaking series, hosted by our music director, Eckart Preu. I'm Kelly Lucera, president of the Long Beach Symphony, and we are so excited to bring you this virtual series featuring interviews with world-class artists, composers, and performers. This evening, we are thrilled to welcome recent Grammy Award-winning singer and conductor, Long Beach Camerata Singers, artistic director James Bass. And now, please welcome to our virtual stage Long Beach Symphony Music Director Eckart Preu, an accomplished singer, educator, and artistic director of Long Beach Camerata Singers, James Bass.
Hello, thank you, Kelly. And it is so great to see you, James, after quite a while.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you.
It has been a while. I think the last time we worked together was for the concert with the Long Beach Symphony on Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, which is 2 years or so ago. It has been a while. And our plans were actually to do the Verdi Requiem together for our Violins of Hope project last year. But I hope we can do this hopefully soon. You live an interesting life, as probably all conductors and singers do, I think, but you live a double life as a conductor and a professional singer. And actually, you're also an educator and a teacher, so you actually live a triple life. How do you manage these different positions, and maybe which one is the love of your life?
That's if I say one of them is my favorite, the other two will be jealous, so I cannot say that. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be with you, Eckart, and with everyone that's here watching today and may watch later. It's great to be back, possibly on the very cusp of making music again, at least having these conversations, and it's just great to see everybody from the Long Beach Symphony. Yes, my life, my professional life really has been a kind of three-cornered hat almost the entire time. As a conductor, singer, and educator, and I've kept all three of those going, and I tell people all the time, you know, the vocal part of my life is probably the one that might have the shortest shelf life, because at some point your voice just doesn't, you know, we all age normally. Conductors can go on as long as we can wave our hands and our brains work, then we can still keep going much later. So I've tried to keep these things going, and I think, I very much think this, they all three feed into each other. When I'm working with students and teaching at UCLA or working with avocational singers, that sharpens my ability to teach and conduct when I'm working with professional singers, and it also affects my music making. So probably same as you, anybody in classical music or Western classical music that is has really any success, you're going to be wanted in more than one place. And so we just have to learn to appreciate airports and figure out how to keep our life, you know, going forward.
Well, it's hard to appreciate airports or the airlines or actually the whole fact of being on an airplane. But this is an interesting topic because, I mean, you are professor and director of choral studies at UCLA. You're associate conductor with Seraphic Fire in Miami, and then you're also the artistic director of the Long Beach Camerata Singers. So you live in the academic world, the professional world, and semi-professional world, but also with volunteer singers. Do you approach each rehearsal and each project differently depending on with whom you work with?
Yeah. The answer to that question is yes and no. There are parts of them that parts of all three of those that are inherently the same. I don't, it doesn't matter to me if you're a beginning musician or an advanced musician. The idea of what we ultimately want to create is compelling art, great music, on whatever level that is. Now, sometimes it may take a little longer to get to that level if you're working with avocational singers. And of course, with students, I'm trying to create experiences that, in addition to maybe a fine performance, is teaching the technical skills that they can replicate over time to become an autonomous professional musician like you and I, and try to enjoy the life that we have and make those decisions. The Long Beach Camerata Singers is something that's incredibly important to me. Has my entire life, I've always worked at some level with a volunteer or avocational group in addition to professional groups. And Long Beach Camerata is unique because it's a mixture of both. There's professional singers and avocational singers. But throughout history, and especially in this country particularly, the cities and the towns and villages that are the most culturally healthy, I think, almost always have a choir and orchestra in them. And so, of course, we have that here in Long Beach, and Camerata is serving as the kind of the vocal instrument of our community. So yeah, that's something that's incredibly important to me. And the avocational amateur musicians can make fantastic music, and it's important for their life, and it's important for our life.
Right, right. I mean, so you are a professional singer yourself, which of course is extremely helpful. I mean, you have to be a singer in order to conduct a chorus for sure. But for you as a soloist, I'm curious how is it to step back from the conducting and supposedly leading it all into the shoes of a performer and a singer? I mean, so the question is, are you a singing conductor or are you a conducting singer? Because when I conduct, I know if the singer knows exactly what's all happening or even is a conductor. It's you can feel that.
Yeah, well, that's a good question, and it's quite unique. You're right, because we as conductors, we're wired to make decisions in a different way, I think, and we're not trying to lord over anyone, but someone has to make the decision about interpretation, and it's informed by years of experience or relationship with the piece. And a singer comes to a piece of music in a similar way. They're trying to come up with an interpretation of their own vocal existence, but then you have to be able to be what's the right word? To be coached and to be influenced by a conductor. And I'll give you a short anecdote. A few years ago, I was singing with Franz Welsemers, the conductor of the Cleveland Orchestra, and he's in Europe all the time. And we were doing a very difficult work by Stravinsky called Lamentations of Jeremiah, Thrani. And the bass solo part is incredibly difficult. And I had prepared this thing, and the way that I really felt that it should be done is kind of like a big Russian cantor, and it's a tone row, but I sang it pretty aggressive, and all this kind of thing. And we get into the rehearsal, and Franz Welsemers, I think, is a wonderful conductor, but he's very subdued, and he says to me, he says, James, do you mind if I give you a different affect? And immediately as a singer, you go, wait a minute, okay, so you mean something different than I'm doing, and you have to balance this out. And he says, I think you're treating this as if you're a stentorian cantor. He says, instead, I want you to sing this maybe like you are a monk that's doubting the entire world. And just in that one word, I had to kind of give up what my interpretation was and try to take in Franz's, and then it became became something very lyric. And ultimately what I realized is that in that moment I learned something, and it's only because I just gave myself gave essentially the reins of my interpretation of my voice to Franz. So it's a balance you have to do as a soloist.
Right. And not all soloists can do it. Not all soloists have neither the artistic abilities nor the vocal abilities to actually adjust that quickly. And I've experienced that too. When you talk to singers, can you do it this way? And that's the way they studied it. That's the way they've been coached. They will not change it or are not able to change it. And it's hard to say which one is which. If it's I don't want to do what you want me to do, or I can't do what you want me to do.
And sometimes it's a little bit of both. And you were right on. You and I think we have similar mindsets, and we're taught, a good vocal coach or teacher will tell you when you're working with a conductor, if they do ask something that you just cannot do, that you just know you can't, you've got to be honest with them and say, hey, Maestro Preu, I don't think I can do it as soft as you want here, but I can try this, I'll give you a different color. And there's that moment that we have to negotiate to try to get to what you want.
Right. Yeah, and negotiation is a term that is hard to do with music, but very often it is actually. It's kind of just sticking your heads together and come to a consensus. And everybody thinks the conductors are the almighty. We are definitely not, and we know that. Nobody else knows that. So people have been asking me, it's like, this past year you haven't really conducted that much. How do you stay in shape, or do you practice conducting? I'm like, no, but as a singer, I think it's different. How did you deal with this past year and not being able to perform? Because, singers are just super spreaders, apparently.
Yeah, and this was very difficult. This exact concept you're asking about, because um, I'm right now, currently I'm in a hotel room in Miami, where I just, my very first live music making in over a year as a singer, really in any significant level, and uh, I wasn't quite sure how my voice might react. I was actually a little bit nervous about it, to suddenly go into having double rehearsals again, and how is the instrument going to respond? And when you're in your home, and your domicile, your apartment, you just don't sing the same way you do when you're on a stage or in a practice room. You just don't bring the same heft to the sound. So I just kind of did some of my minor technical exercises that I keep up, but I really didn't do much full singing. And this week I've been pleasantly surprised that vocally it's felt really fresh, and the producer said, "Hey, you sound great." And so it was a little bit of luck, I think. Unfortunately, none of us have ever been through this. Not a single person in our generation has experienced this as a conductor, singer, teacher, anything. And all of this is a little bit of muscle memory, and the fear of getting back on that musical saddle. Are we going to be able to do it? At least with a small sample size of a week's worth of music making, I can say yes, that I can do it.
Yeah, yeah. Muscle memory is an amazing thing for all the instruments, for singers, for conductors. I mean, your body just knows what to do unless your brain is in the way. Sometimes I think we're just overthinking, and we have the fears kick in, and also whatever psychoses we carry with us.
Yeah.
So you just had a big month, or I don't know. I think it was last month. So you just won a Grammy as the baritone soloist and a chorus master for recording of Richard Daniel Pour's "The Passion of Yeshua." So congratulations to that. It's just amazing.
Thank you very much.
So this recording was conducted by Joanne Falletta with her orchestra, the Buffalo Philharmonic, and their chorus as well, and the UCLA Chamber Singers. Can you tell us, first of all, about the experience, what it feels like, and also how this whole project happened? Because it feels like, okay, Buffalo is there, UCLA is there. How does it all work?
Well, before I even say anything, two things. There's that Long Beach Symphony connection, obviously, with Joanne Falletta, who had spent years there. And to your last point you just made, Eckart, you say, Buffalo's there, here's there. You're going back and forth from Europe, from the East Coast to the West Coast. And what we find out about Western classical music and the canon we do, it really doesn't matter where you are. I mean, we have to go all over the place to make this music. Once you get into the environment with the musicians, it doesn't matter if you're in a symphony hall in Buffalo, or if you're in the Heidensaal in Eisenstadt. Ultimately, the music making is the same. Once you get to that point, we may have to figure out our language and our words, but we end up making the same music, I hope. This experience was it was thrilling, and to win a Grammy for Best Choral Performance, I could not be more proud of the accomplishments of everyone involved in the project. It was an enormous project. The piece is 105 minutes long, so this is not a small undertaking. The chorus is used almost for the entire piece, in both Hebrew and in English, singing all over the range, doing beautiful soft a cappella sections to huge, enormous orchestral sections. So it's really asking the chorus and the orchestra to do quite a bit. This is the first time in my career that I prepared a chorus and then also sang a solo role. So that was something that was unique. I got to sing the role of Caiapha. It was very humbling, all of it. And working with Maestro Falletta was fantastic. She knew the piece very well. She had actually conducted the world premiere at the Oregon Bach Festival. So she was working with Richard Daniel Pour from the beginning, and probably knew the piece better than any conductor in the world. But for an American choir, an American orchestra, and American conductors to be recognized, it's in the choral world, doesn't happen as often. We have to share the global stage with our European counterparts, and they had a head start on us. So it's nice for us to get some reward, and I'll be much more excited when I get to hold it in my hand. It's going to be shipped to me pretty soon, I hope.
Is this going to be shipped from where? Do you know? Is this coming from China or from where?
No, it's and interestingly, every single Grammy trophy, every statue is made by the same person. He's a man in Colorado and makes them all by hand, and then they are shipped to somewhere in Los Angeles, and from there they go on to everyone's home. So it'll eventually make its way to me from Colorado.
Wow. Wow. Okay. I'm sure we're gonna see you with a statue somewhere on Facebook. I'm waiting for that picture. You gotta do it.
Of course.
I'm curious. So in this recording, as you mentioned, but also when we work together with Beethoven 9, you prepare the chorus, not really knowing what the conductor is actually going to do. How do you deal with that? I mean, what do you focus on, and what things do you just leave aside and leave for later?
Yeah, this is another good question because the idea of the chorus master, which has been a position that has really evolved since the early middle 19th century, because prior to that, the composers or the conductors would prepare everything. They would conduct all of it. And then as the two organizations started to become even bigger and repertoire started to separate, now you have folks that are specializing in choral music and orchestral music. But the duties and the skills of the chorus master is a very unique aspect of my life as a conductor, because one of the things you want to do, and I try to take pride in this, is you want to prepare the chorus technically as proficiently as you can, but you must leave the instrument of the choir flexible enough that the conductor can make the decisions and the interpretation they want. It's not my interpretation, it's the conductor's interpretation. So often I will rehearse a choir in especially highly volatile moments, meaning tempo-wise or perhaps articulation-wise. I'll have them learn it several different ways, so that if the conductor says, you know what, let's do that faster and a little bit more articulated, they can make an adjustment very quickly. But then in the general preparation, I take it to the middle of the road as far as tempo. Nothing too fast, nothing too slow. That way it can get bent either way. And the conductor shouldn't, what we don't want is for the conductor of the performance to have a difficult time to make any adjustments. We want it quick, easy. Yes, we can change that, flexible. So the preparation is always a little tricky. And when it's possible, you try to have a conversation or two. What I love to have is what I'm thinking you and I are going to have over the next several years and hopefully longer, is that once we get to do several projects together and several pieces kind of come back again in rotation, I'll know, I'm like, this is how Eckart does this. And so then it's much easier for me to tell the chorus, I know what he does. If he changes it here, be ready. But it's much easier once you've developed that relationship, with the conductor. But it's a unique thing. This is what a chorus master has to do. And to make sure that the choir is absolutely ready and scintillating for the conductor.
Right. So you conduct not only choruses but also orchestras. And so what I'm curious, and I come from a choral background too. I was in boys choir for the longest time, and I feel it's very different to conduct a chorus than an orchestra. And so I wonder what you think about the differences and the commonalities between what we need to do as conductors for a chorus or an orchestra, or what we don't need to do. And then maybe also, and without taking sides, maybe which one you like better. Yeah. Because it feels so different. And whenever I feel I conduct a chorus, I'm like, I've been missing this. It feels so different.
Well, I see. It's interesting. You and I think, had the opposite evolution. I started as a string player, not as a singer. Never sang in children's choirs. Never sang in any kind of youth choirs. Came to the choral part late. I went to Interlochen Center for the Arts for high school I started out in middle schoolish as a violinist, but then I became a double bassist, and that's really where I was going to have my professional career go. So I came from the orchestral side first and was much more accustomed to orchestral conducting. And then began to find out that I had a voice, sang in the ensemble choir and vocal ensembles, and just fell in love with the idea of making art with the words and how different that this can be. And of course, how old vocal art is. It precedes orchestral music by hundreds of years. And so we have this enormous repertoire. The commonalities. When I'm with an orchestra, a Baroque orchestra, even a full orchestra, I just did an enormous concert last year, Mahler 1 and Schoenberg and Zeisel. the orchestra and the chorus ultimately want the same thing from us. They want to know, where does this music go? Where do you want me to go in the phrase? How far should I go? How loud is this? Is this shorter or softer? Those things, the musicians that work with us, they want that information, and they don't want us to be in any way enigmatic about it. Just, here's what I want you to do. They also want to be inspired. Orchestral players like to be inspired a slightly different way, I think, than choral singers. Even professional choirs, they want you to tell them a little bit more of what you want. And I think an orchestra wants more for you to show them. Just tell me a few things, but show me what you want. You'll show me in the pacing. You'll show me in your tempo. You'll show me in how big this phrase goes. But in the only real difference that I sense when I'm rehearsing or working with an orchestra or chorus is a slightly different aspect of my gesture, just a little one. When I'm working with a choir or even professional choir like Seraphic Fire, I can never use a fully angular orchestral gesture. I can't go ba-da, ba-da, because a singer does not take in air like that ever. Now, if there's a fugal section in a Tchaikovsky symphony or something, and the cellos have and I go ba-da, ba-da, I don't have to do anything but an angle, and that's exactly what they want because they are using the bows that way. Although I find that when I work with string players and wind players, if I use the same gesture that the choir has with the breath in it, they play a little bit better. This is just my personal experience. But for me, it's just a little gestural difference. Other than that, it's the pacing of the rehearsal, the orchestra. Let's just get it done. We need to get these things done, but we still want to be inspired.
Yeah, yeah. So we talked about you as a singer. We talked about you as a conductor. Let's talk a little bit about your education. So education obviously is very important to you. You're at UCLA. You're a director of education at Seraphic Fire. What do you teach actually? When you teach, what do you teach, and what is the most important non-musical lesson that you want to give your students on the way?
Well, there's a couple reasons why education in a formal way is so important to me. And, Eckart, someone taught you, someone taught me. The reason that our musical art form exists is because someone cared enough to say, hey, let me show you how to do this. Let me talk to you about conducting. And if we don't do that, we will not have this. And that is absolutely a very clear axiom. If we don't teach people music, they will not play music. So part of it is self-preservation. We love this music. We want it to continue. The other one for me is that my family came from kind of humble financial beginnings, and this is not an art form that was around my home. And I was allowed to go and hear the Florida Orchestra in second grade for free through an education program in the public school system. And everyone asks this question, like, well, how did you start music? When was the moment you knew? I've thought about this so many times. It goes back to that one moment. The first time I heard a full orchestra live as a second grade child for free. And I know what that has meant for me. I just won a Grammy, whatever that means. But all of that would have to go back to that free field trip as a second grader. So that has inspired me to do this. So I teach conductors at the university. So I'm in charge of graduate conducting programs. So talk about a lot of things you and I would talk about, like what are we going to do in this score? What's our interpretation here? How are you going to handle this in a rehearsal? What are you going to, what's this gesture look like? So the technical aspects of conducting, which is always a little strange to teach. Then I work with young pre-professional singers on teaching them techniques on how to be employed in the professional ensemble world. Groups like Conspirare or John Elliott Gardner's English Baroque solos. How do you go to that level and be a soloist? So I teach a lot of that. And then during COVID, I've been teaching lots of music history and romantic performance practice and Johannes Brahms. And so it's a little bit of everything. And there was one aspect of that question you asked. I can't remember the last part. I think I forgot it.
It is what non-musical thing is important, because we always focused on teaching music and technique and this and maybe also music business. But I think there's a lot. So for instance, one of the smartest questions that I was in a conducting class, and the person who led it, very famous conducting teacher, he said, "Who of you would give up everything to become a good conductor?"
Mm.
Everything. And there were several people who raised their hand. I was thinking about it, and I thought, everything is a lot.
Yeah.
And so as people raised their hands, he said, "No, don't do it." Sometimes there are crucial questions like, how do you want to live your life, and what are you willing to sacrifice? And I found that question interesting. It's like in terms of the sacrifices that need to be done, but how much sacrifice is too much? And so, but I mean, it's like kind of what non-musical suggestion or hint or so do you give your students on the way?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that all of us that teach, we're trying to teach and coach better humans and humanity, no matter what profession they end up being in. Obviously, you and I, we are professional musicians, and we are hoping to help create additional professional musicians if we're teaching them. So one of the things that I tell them all the time is that number one, and this seems so simple, is to be a good colleague. Now, that doesn't mean just answer emails. That doesn't mean show up on time. Those things are expected. Being a good colleague is uh, having musical collaborations that are actually negotiable. Meaning, okay, so his interpretation is not exactly my interpretation, but being able to accept and appreciate the flexibility of our art form rather than becoming blindfolded as to this is the only way it can be done, this is how it has to be. And musicians that tend to think that way, I think, tend to burn out faster because they end up not enjoying the music anymore, because there are a million ways to interpret Beethoven 9, and most of them are all acceptable. They can be interesting and fascinating, not just your way. And so part of the kind of non-musical advice I give them is to be a good colleague, be patient with each other. You don't know everything, and I don't know everything. And as soon as you kind of portent that you do know everything about whatever aspect of music you think you know, it's just a construct. You don't know. You weren't there when Beethoven conducted and composed the ninth, but we think, So anyway, it's just the idea of being flexible and to allow humanity to be in your music making, not just business.
Right. No, it's very good advice, and I think it is the challenge. We're paid to have an opinion, right? We are expected to have a rock solid opinion, and so, but then also to open yourself up to other opinions. I think that is always the biggest challenge, and also the biggest pleasure, because that's when surprises happen and when something special happens. So it's really cool.
And if you're like me, what my opinion was 10 years ago on PC music may be different now. My opinion has changed. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, thank you, James. I'm going to hand it back to Kelly because she is in tune with all the Q&A questions from our audience. But thank you.
Thank you for allowing us to be part of such an interesting discussion. And to our audience, please feel free to submit any questions you have for our speakers. We do have some questions already, and the first one is for you both. Marty would like to know, what is a positive or negative musical change you've seen come out of 2020?
Eckart, you want to go first in this?
A positive. Well, I think I'm a positive person, so I think since it was fairly silent, what we all have understand better, we knew all along, but I think we are much more aware of now, is how important music is to our lives. And also, I think how important the social aspect is to music. That yes, you can experience music in a small group. Yes, you can make music over long distances. It all works technically, but I think enjoyment and really the meaning is the experiencing it together. Like having 2,000 people sit in the hall and everybody listens to the same music, yet has a very different experience. And this energy that comes with it, and we feel it on stage. We feed off that. We feed off that energy. And if it's an empty hall, it's like, okay, I still do it, but it's a lot less fun.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with that. The idea of our appreciation and understanding of our togetherness. I mean, putting 150 voice choir on stage with 100 piece orchestra, 250 people. That togetherness, we took it for granted. You know, we complained about having to sit up there tightly on the stage, and now we're like, sure, I'll be happy to sit up there and not be 6 feet apart from each other. Let us just make music together. And one other thing I would say, though, I think it's a positive, is, listen, I do not want to make music on Zoom. I don't ever want to make music on Zoom again. But I think there's a generation of musicians and patrons that have found that there are some ways we can interact in an easy way through this medium that they may have been scared about before. And where we could have, you know, if Eckart can't make it back in time for a conversation with someone or donor, or say, hey, we can talk on Zoom quickly. And people won't be scared of it. Where before it's like, oh, this is too technically, you know, I can't do it. Now we're like, well, we've done a year of it. So I think there will be a few little facets of our musical relationships that will be enhanced by this. It will never replace our music making, that's for sure.
Excellent. Randy would like to know, James, you show up for a solo at Carnegie Hall and suddenly your throat feels sore. Now what? Has this sort of thing ever happened to you or one of your soloists?
It's literally happened to every singer in the world. I mean, it's one of the Eckart earlier said, used the word psychosis. Singers have psychoses all the time because when I play double bass, I never worried about anything except a few hairs on my bow breaking, you know, or maybe a string unraveling. But as a singer, you know, if you don't sing, you don't work. And so we have to manage our bodies very differently. And the wonderful thing about it in our business is, fortunately, most of the time, if you get to someplace like Carnegie Hall and I lose my voice on a Friday afternoon, they're going to be able to get somebody in there quickly to do it. You don't want them to replace you. But and I can tell you many times I have gotten to a dress rehearsal and I didn't feel 100%, but I relied on my technique and just kind of, if I wasn't physically, vocally like harmed, I still could perform, and most people didn't even know. So sometimes it's just in our head.
Susan, a good friend of the symphony, she wants to know, she said, my roommate totally dissolved in tears when you, James, reminded us that COVID precluded us from hearing live music. Will you consider doing front porch concerts after COVID is over?
Well, that's probably back to the very first question we got, is that there are some positives that we learned that we could be a little bit more portable as far as our music making. And this was, I'll speak for myself, this was something that I would not have wanted to do. And now being forced to do it because of our situation, I found that it's quite successful, and how comfortable and happy they were to see a few singers on microphones out in somebody's front yard. And so the answer to the question is yes, we're going to move forward with it. We'll have some type of summer series each year, and the Camerata is excited about it. I know Jan Hauer, our executive director and president, she's like, this is going to be great. So she's already looking for places.
They're very popular here in Long Beach. So bravo on creating that new project.
Thanks.
Jacob would like to know, you each conduct different ensembles in both Long Beach and the East Coast. What are the challenges of having a bi-coastal career?
Well, I can jump on this one quickly. For me, it's the time change. So as a singer, you know, your body is used to a biorhythm, and I'm a bass. So basses do not like to sing before like 11:30 in the morning. We just don't. It's too early. And so, you know, my body is used to a certain time, and then I suddenly come to the East Coast and have a rehearsal, and we go at 10:30 a.m. on the East Coast. Well, that's 7:30 a.m. on my body clock. So I try to sometimes build in a day before so I can just get my voice into a slightly different place. That's one of the issues for me.
Yeah. I think totally travel and time change. It's going west is never the problem. It's much shorter, but going east always takes like a whole day for me, a whole day. And so yes, having that buffer day is great. But you know, we can still wing it even without the buffer day.
Rachel would like to know from you both, what's your craziest live performance story? A wardrobe malfunction, a technical difficulty, something like that?
I haven't lost my pants yet. I think the worst that has happened to me is I lost my baton. Okay. I have lost my cummerbund. But this is pretty much, and then I actually walked out. Like I conducted the movement to the end, walked out, and nobody knew what was going on. I walked back in, and the Brahms continued. But otherwise, nothing really bad has happened to me. Not yet.
I think I've been relatively unscathed as well, especially as a conductor singer. But I have a couple short ones. One was a live performance of Messiah, and this was a really great performance. And it was Seraphic Fire, period orchestra, and I mean, this was just a bang up performance. And we happened to be, I think, in Palm Beach, and it was a like very wealthy, very kind of astute audience, and they're sitting really close to us. And so we get, and the choir is, we're Baroque style, so we're kind of right out front, very close and intimate. And we get to in the Halloween chorus, and everybody, the audience always gets excited there. And in the pause, a lady in the first row in full voice. So there's the hallelujah, 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 and she goes, "They're doing really well." And then the entire choir just started laughing, and we couldn't do the hallelujah at the end because we're all laughing because this woman on the front row said, "They're doing really well." And the other one was a quick one. This was Robert Shaw. I was in the chorus, and Thomas Hampson was singing Elijah. I'm sitting there, and I'm so close. I'm see it happen. And this is the Wretched Steve right before Lord God of Abraham, and Thomas Hampson finishes, and he goes to sing the next note, and he sings it a half step lower than what it's supposed to. And the baritone is to go, "Draw near," and then the strings come in. And so he sings it, and Shaw just cuts everybody off, and he kind of coughs like this. And he looks at the orchestra to go back 2 bars, and he finishes it, and he gets right to the point again, and he tells Thomas Hampson in a stage whisper, Robert Shaw says, "Good luck!" And then he sings the right note.
Well, at least he sang the right note.
He did the second time. It took twice.
James, Rick would like to know, what are some pieces you have always wanted to perform and have yet to do so?
Oh my goodness. These are some good ones. Gustav Holst has an enormous work called The Hymn to Jesus, which is this big choral orchestral piece, really amazing piece that I would love to prepare and conduct for sure. As an orchestral conductor, you name it, any of the Mahler symphonies, 1 and 2 I've conducted, but I would love to have a chance at 4 and 9. This will probably never happen in my life. It doesn't happen for most people. You have to be like a U.S. senator to conduct one of these things. Choral works, there are some, believe it or not, I've never prepared or done a Walton Belshazzar's Feast. And that's a pretty exciting piece too. It's very tricky for the chorus. But there's a whole list of ones that I would love to do. And conducting, I would love to conduct. I've done it many times, prepared and sing as a Doriflae Requiem with orchestra. What a great piece.
Beautiful. All right, one more question. What are some pieces or projects you both might like to collaborate on between the Long Beach Symphony and the Long Beach Camerata singers?
Okay.
I've got a list.
You've got a list? Okay. So, there's some obvious ones I think that we just need to get out of the way that I think our audience would eat up, like Carmina. So, Mahler 2 you mentioned. I've done Mahler 2. Oh, it's always great. Brahms Requiem is always great. My dream piece that I want to conduct before I die, and Kelly needs to seriously fundraise for this, is the Gore Leader.
Oh, the Schoenberg, yeah.
Schoenberg Gore Leader is like my absolute favorite thing.
The biggest orchestra is huge.
The orchestra is enormous. The chorus is even bigger, and it's just totally impossible to do. That's why I want to do it. I mean, it's just really this late romantic piece of work, which is so poetic in many ways. Such a great love story, and this language is so bursting with everything, emotion and harmonies, and so it's really cool. So I sang it once, and I will never forget it. It was a life-changing experience.
Yeah, Berlioz Requiem, same way for me. I've done it many times, and it changed my life. Big piece. But for us, I would love the Vaughan Williams Dona Nobis. I think that there would be something that the audiences in Long Beach would love. You have to pair it with something else, but beautiful work. Chorus can handle it quite well. And of course, with your background and experience, to do a Haydn, Lord Nelson, or Mozart Coronation, in with just like a very wonderfully tight performance there in the terrace. I think the audiences would love that. There's no way Mozart is ever offensive. You know, it's the most like sublime music. Of course, Carmina for sure, and maybe Palavizian dances. Look at the chorus up there. You know, it's some fun things. We've got plenty to do, I'm sure.
Yeah.
We have plenty to do. Well, that was the last question we have time for today. And thank you to our audience for your great questions and for tuning into Musically Speaking today. We look forward to bringing you our next program in a couple weeks, featuring the new artistic director of the Long Beach Opera, James Dara. And thank you so much to Eckart and James for allowing us to be part of this today. We enjoyed learning more about you and look forward to welcoming you all on stage here at the Long Beach Symphony. And go Bruins.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Be well.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.